None of us are flawless, including engineers who, despite being among the most intelligent individuals on the planet, still make errors. Unfortunately, these mistakes can have catastrophic consequences. Here are 10 craziest engineering fails in the world. Number 10. Tacoma, Washington Bridge. The opening of a new bridge is always an exciting and monumental occasion. But in the case of the Tacoma, Washington Bridge, built in 1940, that wasn't entirely true. After just 4 months, this suspension cable bridge collapsed because of an air elastic flutter. Its failure has been studied ever since. The Tacoma, Washington Bridge was the first bridge to have plate girders used as roadbed support. It was also the first cable suspension bridge and the third largest of that type at the time. It had a 2,800-foot central span, and both sides measured 1,100 feet each. It was an incredibly long bridge with 226-foot cable anchorages and 2 5-foot sidewalks. Though because of its length, it was classed as an aero bridge even back in 1940. Construction costs were a whopping $6 million after it was opened to the public. Number 9. The Boston Molasses Disaster. In January 1919, everyone was going about their daily business when a molasses tank burst open in the north end of Boston. Over 2 million gallons of thick, sticky molasses poured out of the tank in waves like a sweet tsunami. The molasses flooded the streets at speeds of almost 35 miles per hour, crushing buildings and trapping horses in its wake. In the aftermath, it was revealed that 21 people had died and 150 more had been injured. 4 decades after the smell of molasses lingered. So what happened to cause this massive tsunami of molasses? About a century later, analysis showed that multiple failures led to this catastrophic event. Safety oversights and flawed steel were some of the most obvious. Still, fluctuating air temperatures and even basic fluid dynamics played a role. You would have thought that basic math would cause the deaths of so many people. Number 8. PYUNGYONG Hotel. It's known as the Hotel of Doom, but its actual name is the PYUNGYONG Hotel, and it's a massive failed engineering project in Pyongyang, North Korea. The 105-story unfinished building has been under construction since 1987. Even today, it is still not finished. The building was supposed to be constructed for the World Festival of Youth and Students, which was a society known for spreading communist propaganda to young people. The 13th conference was supposed to be held in North Korea in 1989, hosting around 20,000 participants. As you can imagine, building a structure that size is probably going to take more than 2 years. And it did. They missed their deadline. North Korea also ran out of money for the $750 million project, which isn't surprising given it made up around 2% of its GDP. Number 7. Walt Disney Concert Hall. As beautiful as the Walt Disney Concert Hall, designed by Frank Gehry, was neighboring properties, looked past its aesthetics. They were more concerned about how its mammoth stainless steel walls were so shiny that they would produce blinding glare for anyone who looked at it. The building, which opened in 2003, had an initial construction cost of $274 million, was undeniably beautiful. Depending on the sun's angle, its colors would change. However, even before it was finished, both business owners and nearby residents said its reflection caused a significant temperature rise. Some residents even had to close their curtains all day to prevent their buildings from heating up exponentially. In the end, something had to happen. The city government investigated and said that the concert hall would have to be sandblasted to remove some of its beautiful sheen. Number 6. The Lotus Riverside Complex in Shanghai. So many things went wrong with the Lotus Riverside Complex in Shanghai. That much is obvious when you come to learn that part of it collapsed almost entirely intact, resulting in the death of a construction worker trapped inside when the 13-story building, known as Number 7 of the Lotus Riverside compound in the Shanghai Minhang district, collapsed. Rumors of shoddy construction and corruption came to light. As it turns out, subcontractors and construction workers had dug out an underground garage and placed the excavated soil next to the building site on a plot of land. The weight of the pile and the hole under the building had weakened its foundations, causing it to collapse in 2010. The collapse went through the court system and many people were held to account. Number 5. Quebec Bridge. When the Quebec Bridge was built, it was an engineering marvel. It would become the largest structure of its kind and the longest bridge in the world. But the best and cheapest plan was chosen to bring it to life. And that probably wasn't the best idea for the 550-meter bridge. Because of a lack of leadership, some problems started to appear as it was being built. Lower cords on an arm of the bridge were bent, and then 2 more bent cords were found. Still, construction continued. Then in 1907, everything came to a head. A worker by the name of Bovice was driving rivets into a section of the bridge when he noticed one of his fresh rivets had snapped in two before he had a chance to report it. Number 4. Charles Gaulle Airport collapse. The last place you want a structural failure to happen is at one of the busiest airports in France. But that is exactly what happened. Part of Terminal 2 at the Charles de Gaulle Airport collapsed in 2004 and killed several people. As it turns out, it was an engineering failure that was to blame. When the terminal was built, it was called beautiful and practical. It was 450 meters long and consisted of an elliptical tube designed with concrete rings. French architect Paul André used principles of his design of the English Channel Tunnel for the airport terminal. The terminal had no internal roof supports, but no one was entirely sure whether that was why it had collapsed. Number 3. Hyatt Regency Hotel Walkway collapse. The Hyatt Regency Hotel Walkway collapse remains the deadliest non-deliberate structural failure in the whole of American history. Up until the World Trade Center collapse, it was also the deadliest structural collapse in 1981. 2 walkways in the Hyatt Regency Kansas City Hotel in Missouri collapsed, one directly on top of the other. At the time, a dance was being held in the lobby during the collapse. 114 people died and 216 were injured. Even though lives were lost, the disaster taught many lessons for people studying engineering. An architectural engineer who was brought in to investigate the collapse, a design later found to be fatally flawed. Almost immediately, he noticed that the original design of the walkways had been changed after years of investigations. The final report cited that the walkways only had minimal capacity to resist their own weight. Number 2. Tropicana Field. Even though Tropicana Field, a covered stadium, looks incredibly impressive from the outside, it's clear to see that a few things were well thought through and it was being designed and built. The stadium was constructed as the home venue for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. It has a massive ceiling with supports and lighting structures. These hang low into the stadium. This means that baseball players can't hit high balls to get home runs. Imagine a stadium impacting how you play your sport. Seems absurd. The slanted roof was designed to reduce schooling costs and protect the stadium as much as possible from hurricanes. By 2010, it was the only active Major League Baseball stadium with a fixed roof, which means it can be retracted. On a few occasions, it has been an obstruction for batted balls. Number 1. SS Sultana Disaster. Greed has caused heartache and disaster since the beginning of time. So why would the Sultana vessel be any different? It wasn't in 1863. This vessel was one of the most modern of its kind. It could carry 376 passengers and crew and was pretty luxurious. When Union prisoners of war were released in 1865, the government authorized steamships to transport passengers from Mississippi's southern ports to the northern ones. They would make $5 for each soldier and $10 for each officer. Cass Mason, the Sultana's captain, was keen to make as much money as possible. He loaded as many people onto the boat as he could, including 2,100 prisoners and 200 civilians, as well as cargo. as he didn't want to miss out on this lucrative government contract. He also opted for a quick patch of a boiler instead of a significant repair that would have cost him money. After a few days of slow but steady progress, the patched boiler exploded. Around 400 people died instantly, either by the explosion or the steam. The wooden vessel then caught fire. People scurried to grab pieces of wood to use as flotation devices as they jumped off the boat. At least 1,800 soldiers and civilians died, and it remains the worst maritime disaster in American history.